Walk me through the user journey a little bit, like the funnel. So they sign up for a free account that gives them, obviously they can access all the user generated content in
Sure.
perpetuity, but they get a 30-day free trial to the premium content, right? So the hope is during that 30 days, they're getting addicted to the library of content and stuff like that. And then what, they get an email or something saying your trial's about to end.
Yeah. So one of the things that we capture in the onboarding process is we learn what level you coach. We ask you what your interests are. And the other thing we do is we ask you where you coach. That we're able to tailor that onboarding experience to give you content that we think you're likely to consume, again, based on the age or level of kids you're working with. We know what we think your network might be, so we can make recommendations for other coaches to connect and start collaborating with. And so the goal is within that 30-day period that you will put down your credit card. And in some cases that happens right away, but we've got a pretty good success rate of demonstrating the value that we bring. And we've become an everyday tool for a lot of coaches out there.
Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. When Aaron Wilbur launched the Coaches site in 2010, he simply wanted to solve a problem he kept seeing in hockey. The best coaches were constantly sharing ideas with each other, but that knowledge rarely made its way to coaches at lower levels of the sport. What started as a small coaching conference eventually turned into a subscription platform with more than 41,000 coaches across 54 countries and over $1.5 million in annual recurring revenue. In my interview with Wilbur, we discussed how he turned conference videos into a subscription product, why evergreen content works so well for coaching education, and how he's building a platform that allows coaches across all sports to share and monetize their expertise. If you want to listen to an audio version of this show, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching this on YouTube, gently tap on that subscribe button so you can watch more interviews with the world's most successful media entrepreneurs. Okay, let's jump into the interview. Hey Aaron, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Simon.
So super excited to talk to you. You're one of those entrepreneurs that I have on the podcast sometimes, where if you look at the website for your company, it's not immediately obvious that it's a media company, and it's not until like you dig around that you realize that that's what it is. So I'm super excited to get into that and your kind of business model and how you work. It's called the Coaches site, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, and it's geared towards hockey coaches. I'd love to get into the origin story, but before that, I just want to hear a little bit about your background in hockey and coaching and everything like that. So, take us back to, or maybe even before that, like how did you get into hockey in the first place?
Well, I was born in Canada, so that's kind of a prerequisite. But I played hockey. Once I stopped playing, I jumped right into the coaching arena. And, that was my goal. My goal was to be coaching, right now in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I managed to stick handle my way, so to speak, up the coaching ladder, moved to Vancouver in 2008 to coach at the University of British Columbia with the men's program there. And, if you're a coach, your expectation is that you're going to move every couple of years. And once I landed in Vancouver and got accustomed to that lifestyle, the pull to continue moving around, chasing that next gig, fizzled a little bit, and I started looking for other things to do, and that's where the seed for the Coaches site got planted.
And what year did you become a coach at the university?
2008.
2008. So, okay. So, 18 years ago. So what were some kind of the pain points of in terms of information ecosystem and media, the pain points that you were having as a coach that obviously we'll get into how you solved them with the Coaches site, but what were some of it seems like, was there a lot of information on strategy, on different stuff like that?
Yeah, great question. So when I was at UBC, I got hired as a coach mentor for Vancouver minor hockey. And for anybody that's coached at a reasonably high level, like coaches in the National Hockey League, and I could safely say that it's the same in the NBA, football, etc., they share ideas all the time. They're an open book. And I think there's an appreciation that just because, I give Simon a drill or tell him about a tactic, that doesn't mean it's automatically going to lead to success. There's a lot of nuance that goes into coaching. So when I got this coach mentorship role, This was my first foray into minor hockey, and I quickly realized that the coaches, to no fault of their own, were doing the same things with their players that my coaches did with me, like 20 years before. And that while the game had really evolved at the higher levels, it hadn't necessarily evolved at the same rate at the lower levels. And one of the reasons was became really apparent that the information from, say, the top of the pyramid wasn't making its way down to the more broader part of the pyramid. And so that just presented an opportunity to say, okay, well, how would we get that information, some of this new information, in the hands of these grassroots coaches?
Yeah, and like obviously this was 2008, 2009, 2010. Like the information ecosystem was much different than it is today. Today there might be,
Big time.
coaches might have their own TikToks and YouTube channels and stuff like that
And
talking
they do.
about their different tactics and stuff like that. But it just wasn't as normal for everyday people to start like uploading content to the internet and stuff like that. And also there weren't like a lot as much like centralized distribution of content as well. So like what were you like leading into the launch of the coaches site? Were there any comps that you were looking at? Were there what kind of content were you consuming on the internet, and what kind of fueled your thinking for what this site could be?
So at that moment in time, if you were a coach, and again, I think this would apply broadly across most sports, you would put your hand up to volunteer, and you would take a coaching clinic, and they'd give you a binder, they'd give you a fire hose of information, probably in person with somebody standing in front of a PowerPoint for 8 hours a day. They'd send you away, and then a couple years later you'd have to do that all over again, albeit with the next tier of information. So when we started this, the goal originally, we just did a coaching conference, and it was partly to bring some of my pals together in the summer so we could hang out in the same place, but also so they could share some of their experience and expertise with the audience. And
And
what
so when you
happened?
say we, what does that mean? Like, was this an actual business you were launching, or?
Exactly. Yeah. So we just started as a conference. And at that time, this conference was going to be a quote unquote business, but it was going to be a hobby that was going to keep me connected to the game and me connected with, friends that were coaching at much higher levels. And what happened was we started this, I think we had 98 coaches in year one show up to attend. In year two, we had over 200, primarily through word of mouth. And then fortunately, my wife, who is in marketing, she was invited down to a retreat by Rogers Media in Cancun, and I got to be her plus one. And at that event, there was another plus one named Di Manuel. He was the CEO of Fitness Town and also the operator of the number one health and fitness blog in Canada. And so we were just sitting on the beach one day and talking about what each of us were up to. And he said, "Have you ever thought about starting a membership site?" And I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "Well, do you film any of these presentations?" And I said, "Yeah, we film all of them." And he said, "Well, what do you do with them?" And I said, "They're just sitting on a hard drive. We don't really know what to do with them." He said, "You should start a membership site. Have you heard of this thing called Netflix?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You should be Netflix for hockey coaches." I'm like, "Can you show me how to do that?" He's like, "Sure can." So he sort of gave us the blueprint. And a year later, we launched a membership site, which was the first iteration of what is now the coaches site.
So for like the conference that 200 people attended, was it like, I don't know what the Canadian hockey version of this, but was it like little league coaches, or was it more kind of advanced, or what were the kind of coaches?
Like literally from parents volunteering to coach their 6 year olds all the way up to National Hockey League coaches, and literally from all over the world. And so we, like, again, from that 98 coaches today, we've got over 41,000 hockey coaches across 54 countries who are a part of our community.
Yeah, and so they were showing up to this conference, kind of talking to each other, but then there were sessions like what you were kind of describing, the kind of PowerPoint of these are the drills you should be learning, these are the different
Exactly.
strategies and stuff, like cutting edge like strategies that like the top hockey coaches are using to train their teams, is what
Bing,
basically what that was.
bingo.
Yeah. And so you meet this guy and he says like you could scale this more effectively and probably, run a more, consistent business rather than just a once a year conference by doing some kind of membership thing. And you said the Netflix for hockey coaching. But what did that mean in practice? Does that mean that like you were just basically uploading these like presentation videos and then putting them behind a paywall, or was there something more comprehensive than that to start out with?
You know what? Initially, it was exactly that, Simon. We were just taking the videos of the presentation. At that time, we had a little bit of a bank going, and we would put those online, charge a fee to access them. And, originally we just said, well, we'll do this conference every single year, and then we'll drip out the presentations throughout the hockey season, and then rinse and repeat the next year. But as we did that, and people started reaching out to us with questions, can you get this type of content, or I'd like a solution for this. And so we started reaching out to other coaches in our database, and before you knew it, we were turning on cameras independently of the conference, capturing additional video conference or additional video content. And then something else happened, and that was people started reaching out and saying, hey, I've got some ideas to share, but I don't have the vehicle to get them out in the world. Can I do that through you? And that really provided a bit of a eureka moment.
And like the membership, was that like a monthly membership, like a Netflix subscription?
Correct, monthly and annual.
Yeah. And so how were people, back then discovering the membership? Was it just people who went to the conference, they got automatically enrolled or something like that? Like how were you marketing this content?
Honestly, marketing would probably be a really strong word at that stage. Like this was still very much more of a hobby than a business, but predominantly through social media, definitely through word of mouth. And what we found is that the conference and really the efforts that went into marketing that really became our primary awareness channel. I will note that I'd have to look back on the exact year, but we got into the podcast game, and I would say that was the first time outside of the conference we really took a step into leveraging media as a community building strategy.
Yeah. So the social media, like I was looking, you have like several 100,000 followers across like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and all that kind of stuff. So what kind of content were you producing all the way back then?
Predominantly just clips of the content from the presentations themselves. And then again, as we started getting into other forms of media, i.e. the podcast, we'd clip that. So, I mean, not surprisingly, we learned really quickly that video played really well with our audience. And one of the challenges actually that we faced early on, there was a period where we were putting the clips of this content out. So for example, if we did an on ice presentation of our conference, you could come in on Instagram and see a drill. And that was really popular. One of the key learnings we had is that we had to direct people from that clip back to the site, because a lot of people or a lot of coaches, I think for a while, just assumed that we were just a really cool Instagram channel where they could get free coaching clips. And we're like, no, you actually got it. There's way more if you click here and you go behind the paywall.
And so how did you do that?
We just had to be a lot more intentional with our calls to action. And initially, our goal was to say, well, if we can get people into our email list, be that through the podcast or through social, we would then have the opportunity to convert them into paying subscribers. However, the business has changed and evolved since then, and that now we have if you were to go onto the coach's site, the interface would probably more closely resemble LinkedIn, meaning that you can create a profile. It's like any traditional social media site. And so now our goal is to get people into a free profile, give them a free trial, and then convert them from there.
Yeah, so like you have like a user generated content component. So
Correct.
you said that like there were like coaches that were sending you videos or asking if they could record their own videos. Was that completely volunteer based, or how were you incorporating stuff from like outside the core conference?
Correct. So it started as people were reaching out volunteering to give us content, and at that stage we said, well, what do we think would play best from a content perspective? So again, at this stage, when we started, I think, Twitter had just gotten going when we started. So fast forward, this is about 5 years later. there was a lot more distribution channels out there. So we started scouting for prospective creators, and it wasn't just about being a really good coach. You also had to be a really good communicator, and finding those folks was like spotting a unicorn in some cases. So we started identifying some early creators that predominantly we would just pay per post, and that would live behind our paywall. And then we just recognized that what this is going to blow up. Just more and more coaches are more willing to share their coaching IP, so to speak, online. So how do we give them the tools to do that more efficiently?
And were they just like recording with their own like webcams and stuff like that, and just sending in raw video, or was there like a more formal editorial process in place?
It really varies. In some cases, it was predominantly written content. But the one thing to keep in mind that's unique about coach is that if you're a coach, particularly at a higher level, you're probably already using a video editing software just to coach your team and to use that as part of your season curriculum. You're probably using a drill software to create drills that can then be sent out to your team. So really, coaches already had the tools at their disposal to create the content, and we were just providing them a vehicle to share that with a really specific audience.
So you talked about like the podcast being a key component in terms of like your marketing. Around when did you launch it, and what was the format?
So I'd want to say that we started it in 2018. And originally it was really just, I think like a lot of podcasts, we didn't know what the heck we were doing, but we were just bringing on, friends who were coaches. And, unfortunately we had the benefit of, having access to some pretty high level people. And it was myself and a co-host, Calvin Check, who ended up leaving the show because he was coaching. He went on to his own little coaching journey. He's now back working with us, but just the two of us would have a conversation with a coach. But now it's a lot more structured. Now we have sponsors that are part of the show, and we've really sort of steered the direction into not being so much about the X's and O's, but really just sharing a coach's journey and all the different twists and turns that have led them to where they are in their career. Because coaching's not like being, an accountant or a lawyer. There's not, necessarily a linear path. It takes a lot of, there's a little bit of luck involved and a little bit of chance.
And is it like mainly kind of more high profile coaches, or are you getting that like that dad who's coaching for their 6-year-old's little league kind of thing as well?
It's predominantly more high-profile coaches. So, for example, this year we had a bit of a pinch me moment for myself. We had Scotty Bowman, who's won 11 Stanley Cups, all-time winningest coach. He's 92 years old, sharp as a tack. So we had him. But I would say the vast majority of our guests are coaching at a professional level, and generally the kind of top tier levels.
So it's the early days. It's just kind of some kind of paywall. You're putting these videos from the conference up there, and then some people start submitting their own stuff, but it's kind of ad hoc. Talk me through the evolution of the site to what it is today, where it's kind of operating like a community slash social network. Around when did that happen, and what did that involve from like a technical perspective in terms of like transforming that?
Sure. So there was an article that came out in 2019 in Sportsnet, so our version of ESPN north of the border, and it was on a hockey club called Modo. And so for anybody that follows sports in Europe, or if we use sort of the football or soccer example, the pro team operates an academy, a youth academy, and their goal is to develop as many players within that youth academy that ultimately play for their pro club, or that they can sell or transfer to other clubs. And so Modo had produced, for anybody that's a hockey fan listening, the likes of the Sedin twins, Marcus Naslund, Peter Forsberg, Victor Hedman. And this is a little tiny community about 600 kilometers north of Stockholm, of about 40,000 people, that was just punching way above their weight class. So in this article, it shared that there was a coach in the academy named Anders Melinder, who had played a role in the development of all these future Hall of Fame players. And it was one of these moments where I said, gosh, we're out here chasing all these NHL coaches to come speak at our conference or to showcase them on our platform. But here's this coach, Anders Melinder, who nobody's heard of, but arguably has more to offer the hockey coaching community, particularly at the youth levels, which was the vast majority of our subscriber base at the time. How do we empower a coach like that to share their knowledge with our community? At the same time, that planted the seed in that we said, if there's a coach like that in northern Sweden, there's probably a soccer coach in Brazil, a rugby coach in South Africa, and a cricket coach in India. And all these coaches are probably like-minded, that they just want to share their ideas and get them out in the world. How can we create the technology that maybe removes some of the friction or barriers that might currently exist for them doing that? So that was one part. The other thing we observed at that time is that more and more coaches were sharing content through social media. But when we would reach out to these coaches, we'd say, like, how does this, do you monetize this? How does this affect your business? What are the benefits that you gain from this? And largely it was vanity based, meaning that they'd say, I'm a little bit more recognizable. People reach out to me and thank me for sharing my ideas, but as it's a lot of work, and there's not an obvious way to get compensated. And in a lot of the ways that, say, YouTube or say Patreon, like, they just weren't as niche as they were and as maybe as popular as they were. There wasn't, the path to monetization was a pretty big obstacle. And we said, well, if we could solve that for them, as well as providing them the tools where they just, with their phone, that they could share their best ideas, that would be really powerful. So that was really the framework we use for, our current platform today.
So to walk me through the functionality of the platform. Like, I noticed I was on the website and I was like, well, first let me back up a little bit. So it sounds like you expanded the purview of your company beyond just hockey coaches to all kinds of coaches. Like, you wanted to build like a platform for all kinds of coaches. Is that, did I get that right?
Yeah, that'll officially happen in September of this year.
Okay, so it's still predominantly hockey coaches.
All
on the
hockey,
platform.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you get on the website, and I see like a video or a podcast episode or a blog post, like title, like subject line or headline. I click on that, and immediately has a pop up, and it's trying to make me
Yes.
sign up for an account. Or so. Like, walk me through that kind of user flow of how people are typically coming into the website and how they're like becoming kind of like more integrated in the community. Because you said there's like a free tier and a paid tier. So I just want to understand that dynamic of how people are interacting on the platform itself on free versus paid.
For sure. So, generally people are first introduced to the platform by seeing a piece of content on social media, clicking on that, and that could be content that we publish or that one of our users publish through the platform. They come to the site, they get prompted to create a user profile, and at that same time, they receive a free 30-day trial to access all of our premium content. And so, and then obviously from that point, it's our job to sort of onboard them into a paid subscription. At the same time, we work with a lot of organizations. So, for example, currently we work with 11 federations. We support their coach education. We work with a number of leagues and larger associations, be that state governing bodies or provincial bodies up in Canada. And the benefit that we offer these organizations is that we've created functionality around communication and file sharing on the back end that makes it beneficial for them to onboard groups of their coaches in one batch. So that would probably be our, from a scaling perspective, that's evolved into our most efficient tactic.
So there's a free tier, but it's only the 30-day trial. There's not some kind of ongoing free version where I could just remain free, non-paying in like perpetuity or anything like that.
No, great question. So yeah, just like any traditional social platform, you can remain free, and there's a ton of value you can gain from that. You can follow other coaches, consume their content. The only thing you would not get access to is premium content published by the coach's site.
And so what's the difference between the free content and the paid content? Like, what is the free content that they would have access to?
So the free content would be our user generated content, which in some cases we might, if we identify that we've got a really popular creator, we can then onboard some or all of their content behind our subscription.
Okay, so if I'm just an everyday coach coaching the 6-year-old, I have some things I want to share about my coaching experience. I can you upload content if you're just a free user, or do you have to be
Absolutely.
paid? Yeah, so
Absolutely.
I'm uploading my plays, my drills, and stuff like that, and it's free for me to upload that, and then other free subscribers can see as much of that content as they want, right?
Exactly.
And so then there is the paid tier. So that is like content that's like more officially endorsed and professionally made by your company.
Correct.
Yeah. And that's like, do you have like a group of like freelancers, or, I mean, like how do you work with like the different various like content creators to create the kind of premium content?
You know what? It really varies. Pardon me. So it's anchored in our event. So we did the one big conference, TCS Live, which we still host. But today we partner with a number of organizations. So, for example, last September we did an event with the Minnesota Wild, which we partnered with Minnesota Hockey and the local high school coaches association. So when we go out to Minnesota, same playbook. We put coaches on stage. We also do an on ice component, but while we're there and we have cameras turned on, we capture a ton of other content, and that's when we would work with some of our more popular creators to create some more, call it premium offerings that live behind our paywall.
And how much content on like a weekly basis new content are you creating that goes behind the paywall?
That's a great question. A lot. Like I would say, almost on a daily basis, we're putting new content out there.
And is it like mainly video content? Is it also a lot of like articles? Like what's the kind of mix there?
Our premium content is primarily video based.
And is it kind of like, I'm always interested in this like dynamic of evergreen versus more ephemeral content that loses its value pretty
Yeah.
quickly? Is it just like a large library of evergreen content where something 10 years ago, posted 10 years ago, has in some ways as much value as something that was posted yesterday?
100%. So I think that's really, I would say that, what you just described there, Simon, that's kind of I guess the bit of the magic behind our business is that, not only is it evergreen, but in some cases, I mean, this is, maybe on a bit of a somber note, but it's something that's recent, that's meant a lot to us. So a good friend of ours, Paul Boutillier, won a Stanley Cup with the New York Islanders, is a savant at coaching defensemen, just a brilliant guy, and has had an impact on so many players and coaches. He passed away a couple weeks ago, and he presented at our conference a number of times. He's been on our podcast, and so for anybody that's been touched by Paul, it's really hit us that, man, like, we're really preserving his legacy, and moving forward, and he's going to be able to have an impact on the game for perpetuity, which is something we're super proud of and take really seriously. But as you said, in our space, the content is evergreen, and I think another thing worth noting is that if you're a coach, one thing that I grew up with is I had a binder with me, and that binder is where I kept all my drills. If I got a new idea, I'd have to scribble it down, would live in the binder, and we recognized that coaching content was shifting from analog to digital, yet there wasn't a digital binder to keep all this content. And so what we've really become is an aggregate that, as coaches put things on YouTube, on Instagram, whether it comes on our site, we become that aggregate where they can organize all of that content in the back end of their profile in what we call a locker.
Like it's like a favorites or something like that, where they can, like, almost like a Pinterest board, but for coaching.
Yeah, that's, I would say, more like a Pinterest board. So it's really built for, I guess, a coaching specific purpose. But that coach would be connected, obviously, to their own locker, but they would also be connected to the locker of their organization, maybe their team staff, maybe a group they create with coaches with like-minded interests. So it's really just a really robust, almost like a G drive, again, specifically for coaches or sports organizations.
Did you have to build this platform from scratch, or is it like a third-party white labeled platform of some sort?
No, we built it from scratch.
Yeah. And so Walk me through kind of the user journey a little bit, like the funnel. So they sign up for a free account that gives them, obviously they can access all the user generated content in
Sure.
perpetuity, but they get a 30-day free trial to the premium content, right? So the hope is during that 30 days they're getting kind of addicted to the library of content and stuff like that, and then what, they get an email or something saying your trial's about to end, or they, or at
Right.
that point have they already like uploaded their credit card and it just immediately kicks in and they start paying? How does that dynamic work?
Yeah. So one of the things that we capture in the onboarding process is we learn, what level you coach. We ask you what your interests are. And the other thing we do is we ask you, where you coach. And so, with that, we're able to tailor that onboarding experience to give you content that we think you're likely to consume, again, based on the age or level of kids you're working with. We know what we think your network might be, so we can make recommendations for other coaches to connect and start collaborating with. And so the goal is within that 30-day period that you will put down your credit card, and in some cases that happens right away. But we've got a pretty good success rate of demonstrating the value that we bring, and we've become an everyday tool for a lot of coaches out there.
And then the membership, it looks like it costs like a roughly, depending on like a whether you're signing up for monthly or annual, around $12 to $15 per month. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then you said that there's also like a group subscription thing. So that's where they're connecting to a salesperson, and then you're
Right.
making some kind of deal that they get a certain number of seats across dozens or
Exactly.
hundreds of people. What's the kind of organization that would get that kind of group subscription?
Great question. So, I mean, we work with over 300 organizations today of all sizes. So, again, at the high end, you'd have the German Ice Hockey Federation. So, every coach in Germany, from their Olympic coach right down to their volunteer parents, all receive a subscription to the coach's site. And there, again, the value is they're connected into the German Ice Hockey Federation locker to access all those resources, in addition to the resources that we provide them. But then we also have, small youth associations, around the world. But what's really cool about those is that, for example, if you coach hockey in Vancouver, where I'm from, or if you're in Detroit, there's already access to a lot of really good people. But what we found is for a lot of these more rural communities or associations, they don't get access to that. So we really become that gateway to maybe more premium offering, and just ensuring that they get access to the best information that's out there.
So I was looking at your website. You have a courses section where people can spend some finite amount of money, whether it's like $50 or something like
Yeah.
that, and download a course. Is that just you taking stuff that's behind the paywall and like packaging it together and then selling it as a one-off? What's your thinking with the courses?
Yeah. So what we found is in some cases, we had created, when we recognized that there was an opportunity to work directly with the youth associations. Our first step in doing that is we went out and created our own year-long curriculum, starting at U6 all the way up to the U12 level. So, effectively, we created a copy and paste blueprint that you could follow, assuming you're doing 2 practices a week from September until March. And so that was an offering that was made available as a way to entice the associations or groups to come onto the platform. But what we found is that some of the content, or some of the information that coaches were looking for, didn't really translate into really long form video. I think we can all appreciate that in the world that that you deal with, that longer form content isn't really there's not really an appetite for that. So we said, well, what if we could chop it up and do it in a way that coaches could just follow along in a course format? So we started, we created a course software, and then we started identifying some coaches that we could go create some more specialty content. So for an example of that, there's a course on shooting and goal scoring there, delivered by Brandon Arado, who's the head hockey coach at the University of Michigan. And literally breaks down every imaginable detail of the shot, and how he would coach his team to score goals.
So why sell that as a one-off product versus just making that part of the membership? Like, did you feel like there was a market opportunity of people who might not want to sign up for the membership but would be willing to pay for a single course?
You know what? It's a great question. So originally we felt that there was an appetite from our existing membership where a lot of them indicated that they wanted more and that they wanted access to more of this type of content. And one of the things that we faced with a lot of, I guess, the bigger name coaches that we worked with, they were coming to speak at our conference, and that's how our user base was getting access to them. But we felt there was an opportunity that, in some cases, to get in front of these coaches and create maybe a more robust offering. But to do that, we needed to figure out a revenue sharing agreement, hence the a la carte option. But that is something that we're looking at to say, okay, now that we have some data behind it, what might that look like if we did bundle that into the subscription offering?
Oh, I assumed that these courses were bundled into the subscription offering. You were just selling to an additional customer base by selling them as one-off products.
No, they're all a la carte. So anybody could come in and buy a course today. But, we will be actually, we talked about moving into other sports. So we've partnered with Jesse Marsh, who's from Racine, Wisconsin, but he's also the head coach of Canada's national soccer team that's going to be competing in the upcoming World Cup. So that course will be released at the start of the next youth soccer season in September. And that will be bundled into the initial subscription offering. So, just as we evolve and collect data, this will be our first step into that arena.
You mentioned sponsors on the podcast. So what's your advertising strategy?
So we work with partners in a number of ways. So they can sponsor our conference, which I would say has really become and remains our anchor. We have our podcast, but then we have things like, newsletter, social media collaborations, those sorts of things. But, what we have found is that the value that we can bring to partners is that the decision maker in a lot of these organizations, particularly in software, it's really tough to identify who those people might be, because in a lot of cases, the decision maker is a volunteer, or they might not list their role in the youth association on their LinkedIn page, for example, or on social media. So what we found is that we've become a great vehicle and a really cost-effective vehicle for these companies to identify and get in front of the people that ultimately are going to make the decision on their product or service.
So do you have any consumer products like skate companies or puck companies, or is it purely B2B vendors?
Predominantly B2B vendors.
And then for the conference, how has it evolved from its early days when it was like 98 coaches? Like, how big is it this year? Is it just one big conference, or are you doing more regional stuff? Like, how do you think about the live event tech part?
Yeah, so our flagship event, TCS Live, for the past 4 years, it's been hosted at the University of Michigan. And last year we had over 500 coaches attend, representing 14 countries. So, and again, from all levels of the game. This year's edition, we've partnered with Hockey Canada, and it's going to be hosted in Edmonton this upcoming August, alongside the Hlinka Gretzky U18 World Championships. And so in addition to TCS Live, I mentioned the event that we did with the Minnesota Wild. So we do collaborate with other professional teams and hosting, coaching clinics, generally on a 1 to 2 day basis. But we also support events, for example, Hockey Calgary does a leadership day, which we support. So we'll bring out, last year we brought out Ryan Huska, the head coach of the Calgary Flames, to participate in that event. And so we do a lot of regional events, and just working with our stakeholders. And generally it's in the form of, hey, we'll bring some of the talent and we'll turn the cameras on, and we'll ensure that, your membership that maybe can't make it to the event live, or even for the folks that can't make it out to the live event, they can revisit or access that content in your locker on the coach's site.
And then in your pitch to me, you revealed the annualized revenue run rate. Are you comfortable revealing that here, or?
Yeah, so our ARR is north of 1.5 million.
Okay. And then, so how is your company structured? Do you mainly work with contractors? Do you have full-time staff? How do you approach that?
Yeah, so we've got a full-time team of 14 people right now. And then in total, there's probably an additional half a dozen contractors that touch our work on a weekly basis. And And then in addition to that, as we touched on with the creators themselves, we have a number of relationships with coaches all over who are producing content for us on the coaches site.
So you mentioned this kind of expansion that's happening in September.
Yeah.
So walk me through, and then I think you also hinted that you're trying to do stuff more with like creators and stuff like that. So walk me through what you have planned going forward and how you plan it, because that's a big ambition to bring. You're
Yeah.
well known within the hockey world to like, obviously there's like a huge like soccer/football world out there that probably has its own like, huge already existing media ecosystem. How do
Yeah.
you plan to kind of like penetrate into those other areas?
Well, it's been really interesting, Simon. Like as I said, we sort of had this idea, when we first built our current platform, that the focus was going to be on serving the creator, and then not only giving them the tools but also a vehicle to monetize their content. But given where we started, that was sort of a slow transition to figure that out. And so we feel we've done that now. And so, as you noted, sports tech is booming right now. There's a lot of people trying to get into the game. There's a ton of content out there, but our sites are very much set on the creators that maybe don't have the bandwidth to go get set up with Stripe, or build the WordPress account and do all this sort of the technical infrastructure that's required to monetize their content. And we just make it really easy for them to share their ideas. And again, we provide the consumer the benefit of not only consuming that content, but organizing and saving it in a way that would be meaningful to a sports coach or organization.
So how does a creator monetize on your platform? Because like I understand that you sometimes take creators and put the stuff like manually behind your paywall, but is there a way for them to erect their own paywalls and start monetizing that way? Like how does the actual creator relationship work?
Yeah, another great question. So when we first started down this path, what we anticipated is that you would subscribe to the coaches site, but then you could also subscribe to Simon Owen's channel on the coaches site. Where it's evolved to, though, is that starting in September, we'll have a revenue sharing model with our subscription that'll be paid out on a pay-per-view basis.
Is it like a Spotify pro rata
Exactly.
like revenue share? So you will create a pool of money, and based on that creator's percentage of views that month, then they get that correlating percentage of whatever that pool of money is.
Exactly.
Is that how it works? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a daunting task. Is that like, obviously that's a slightly more complicated thing than saying like the Substack model, where it's like you start up your own subscription and then you'll just get the revenue from the people who subscribe to your specific publication, and we'll just take a cut out of that. This is something that's a lot more complicated. All those calculations and stuff like that. What made you decide to go with that model versus allowing them to just have their own subscriptions?
Yeah. Honestly, it was just we looked at it from our users' perspective, and we said, you know what? Like at the end of the day, our goal is to ensure that every kid has access to a great coach, and we know that of all the coaches we spoke with, and even just in my own shoes, like I coach my son now, and you pull in influences from all over, and we said if we segment this, we're going to limit the access to information. At the end of the day, that's why we believe we exist in the world, is to really democratize coaching content. And so we felt that the best vehicle to do that was to share in the revenue. And again, it wasn't short-sighted. It took a lot of it's taken a lot of planning, but we feel that we have a model that both serves us, but also more importantly serves the creator.
Can any creators sign up for the revenue sharing process, or is this like an invite only type of thing?
This will be invite only, and not dissimilar to other platforms. We would have certain thresholds that they'd have to meet to access the monetization opportunity.
So how are you going to start luring non-hockey? Is it just how are you going to lure non-hockey creators into this? Like, because there's always that chicken and the egg problem of like they don't want to start creating on a platform until they know there's an audience there, but there isn't yet a non-hockey audience on there yet. So like, how do you think about like bringing those creators in and stuff like that?
Yeah, so what we've sort of done is looked at it more regionally, and we sort of look for those beachheads. So, for example, I mentioned earlier that we've partnered with Jesse Marsh of our men's national team, who coming up here might be the most recognizable person in Canada. So instead of saying, "Hey, we're going to jump into all of soccer," our focus to say, "Hey, we're going to focus on soccer in Canada to start with. And how would we build that initial community? And at what stages or what thresholds would we have to meet before we start, inviting creators and also consumers in from outside that market?" So, but I certainly don't want to suggest that it's simple, because it's far from that. It's taken a lot of strategic thinking, but so far that's worked really well for us in hockey.
So you started out as kind of like a sort of a media company, but like your goal is like over time you're going to look more and more like a tech company.
Yeah, absolutely. But I still believe that at our core, the folks that don't have the time or bandwidth to create a lot of their own content are, the coaches we see standing behind an NHL bench or on an NBA sideline. And those are the coaches that, whether it's through our events or other means, like I don't see a world where we abandon being a media company to work with those coaches to create content. And ultimately, again, that's great content for our consumers, but that's also the content that draws in and builds trust with a lot of our creators.
So when you look forward 3 years from now, what's the kind of dream scenario of what your company looks like in terms of its kind of mix of content and stuff like that and users?
Yeah, so I mean, our goal from we certainly want to be, we want the main driver to be the creators on our platform. And again, we anticipate that while we will still create our own suite of premium content, we'll probably do less of that, but hopefully we continue to get better at it. And then in 3 years' time, we anticipate that we'll have communities built across kind of the five major North American sports. So, hockey, football, soccer, basketball, and baseball.
So your hope is like 3-4 years from now, a Division 3 college baseball coach. It's just a no brainer. He's on your platform, interacting with other coaches and sharing insights and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And here's the benefit we haven't discussed. And I mean, there's not necessarily data to back this up, but I've got a lot of emails and thank you text, is that, when you Google, so let's say that I'm a coach and I apply for a job, the first thing that general manager or the person sifting through the resumes is going to do is they're going to Google your name. If you've been on the coach's site, we're the first thing that's going to show up. So not only does that person now get the opportunity to read your resume, they can see you in action on a stage, on a field, doing your thing. And, that's opened up so many doors for some of the contributors that we've been fortunate to work with. And I think that just in the world we live in, we all recognize the power of how we show up online. And again, we've become a really valuable tool for coaches who not only want to share their ideas, but might want to expose their ideas to people that are looking to hire their next coach.
So it's going to be like a LinkedIn as well.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, Aaron, those are all the questions I have for you. Where can people find you online?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Aaron Wilbur, and you can search at the coach's site on any of the usual social handles.
Awesome. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Simon.